You're not here for justice. You're here for absolution. Every time something grotesque surfaces, you feel a surge. It isn't just anger. It's relief. Finally, someone worse than you. Someone who can carry the weight alone. While you comment, condemn, and repost, your conscience settles. Order restored, the stain located, the threat contained. But here's the part you avoid. If the problem is structural, your neutrality isn't neutral. Your comfort has a source. Your silence has a function. Your benefits have a cost. You're just not the one paying it. You don't actually fear evil. You fear losing the story where you're the good one. If that unsettled you, stay. You like to believe that evil is rare. An accident, a deviation, a distorted mind that slipped through the cracks. It comforts you to think that way. Because if evil is an exception, then the world is mostly fine. If the monster is singular, then the system is intact. If the face is guilty, the structure is innocent. And if the structure is innocent, so are you. Every time a scandal erupts, you feel something sharp and immediate. Outrage rises fast. Your voice hardens. Your certainty becomes clean and bright. You point, you condemn, you share. For a moment, everything feels morally organized again. There is a villain. There is a crime. There is a punishment. The chaos is contained inside a single body. But have you noticed how quickly the relief comes? How fast the system breathes again once a face has been sacrificed? You don't actually need justice. You need containment. You need the reassurance that the rot is local. Because if the rot is structural, then the ground you stand on is not neutral, and that is harder to face. It is easier to believe that corruption lives in those people, in the powerful, in the deviant, in the immoral few. It is harder to admit that corruption requires silence, compliance, benefit, convenience. You feel disgust when you see abuse exposed, but you rarely feel disturbed by the mechanisms that allowed it to thrive for years. Why? Because mechanisms are impersonal, and impersonal things are harder to hate. You can destroy a monster. You cannot easily dismantle a structure that feeds you. So the mind does something subtle. It isolates, it personalizes, it dramatizes. It tells you that the problem has a face. And as long as it has a face, you can stay clean. But what if evil does not hide? What if it is protected? Protected by contracts no one signed openly. Protected by routines no one questions. Protected by benefits no one wants to lose. You condemn what is visible. And in doing so, you preserve what is invisible. Because if the problem is structural, you are no longer just watching. You are positioned inside it. And once that possibility appears, the outrage begins to feel less stable. Carl Jung once wrote that, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You prefer to think that evil erupts. Jung would say it accumulates, not only inside individuals but inside collectives. He called it the shadow, not the dramatic cinematic darkness you see in villains, but the rejected parts of the psyche, the impulses you deny, the capacities you refuse to recognize, the aggression you insist belongs to someone else. The shadow does not disappear because you disapprove of it. It reorganizes. And when a society refuses to see its own shadow, it projects it. Projection is elegant. It allows you to experience moral purity while disowning complicity. You see cruelty in a leader, greed in a corporation, abuse in a public figure, and you feel clean for condemning it. But what shocks you most is not the existence of evil, but the discomfort of seeing a fragment of yourself reflected in it? You are not the criminal. You are not the tyrant. You are not the abuser. But you participate in systems that normalize small violences every day. You tolerate humiliations in workplaces. You ignore manipulations in institutions. You laugh at cruelty disguised as humor. You tell yourself it is minor, necessary, part of the game. The shadow is not only personal, it is structural. It lives in policies that dehumanize quietly, in hierarchies that reward silence, in incentives that prioritize profit over dignity. And when those structures finally produce an obvious monster, society reacts with theatrical outrage. Because it is safer to attack the product than to question the factory, the ego protects itself by simplifying. It's just him. It's just her. They were corrupt. That sentence is a psychological shield. If the evil is individual, your identity remains intact. But if the evil is structural, your identity becomes unstable. Because then the question shifts. Not who did this, but what allows this to keep happening, and even more dangerous, what part of me benefits from not asking? Projection keeps the mirror pointed outward. It prevents you from noticing how invested you are in the stability of the very systems you criticize. You don't only fear evil, you fear losing the narrative in which you are innocent. And once that fear is touched, the shadow moves closer. Projection is not accidental, it is strategic. The ego depends on a stable self-image, and most people have built theirs around one central belief: I am a good person. That belief is not superficial, it is structural. It organizes how you see yourself, how you justify your choices, how you sleep at night. So when evidence appears that the world is deeply unjust, the psyche faces a threat. If injustice is systemic, then neutrality is not neutral. If exploitation is embedded, then participation is not innocent. If violence is normalized, then silence is not passive. And that destabilizes the ego. So something must be done. Not externally. Internally. The mind isolates a figure, a face, a scandal. You feel the surge of condemnation, and inside that condemnation is relief. Because punishment restores moral symmetry. A guilty person has been identified. You have reacted appropriately. The order is symbolically repaired. But look closely at the sequence. Do you question the structure with the same intensity you condemn the individual? Do you examine the incentives, the hierarchies, the cultural rewards that made the abuse profitable? Or do you stop once a face has absorbed the blame? You say you want justice, but justice that requires restructuring comfort feels excessive. Justice that requires losing advantage feels threatening. Justice that demands you reconsider where your money flows, where your loyalty lies, what you tolerate daily, feels personal. So the ego negotiates. It says, I spoke out. I shared the post. I don't agree with that behavior. And that becomes enough. Enough to preserve the self-image, enough to avoid deeper disturbance. But answer this carefully. When was the last time you questioned a system that benefits you? When was the last time you withdrew support from something convenient but ethically compromised? When was the last time your outrage cost you something real? Not reputation, not online approval. Something concrete. Access, comfort, belonging. Because that is where projection begins to crack. As long as evil has a face, you can attack it. Once evil is structural, you have to locate yourself inside the architecture. And that is where the discomfort sharpens. Because the shadow is no longer abstract, it is relational. It connects you to what you claim to oppose, and the ego will resist that connection with surprising force. You see it every day. A public scandal explodes. Messages flood timelines. Voices rise. Statements are issued. This is unacceptable. This cannot continue. This is who they really are. And then, the same institutions remain funded. The same corporations remain supported. The same cultural patterns remain intact. You feel the surge of moral clarity, but your routines do not change. You still trust the systems that produced what you condemned. You still participate in structures you describe as broken. You still benefit from arrangements you publicly criticize. Because structural change is slow, and slow change threatens stability. You tell yourself it is not your responsibility, you are just one person. But notice something subtle. When someone does question the system instead of just the individual, discomfort spreads. They are called extreme, naive, radical, difficult. People shift in their seats. Conversations get tense. There is irritation, not because the question is absurd, but because it is destabilizing. You have seen it. Someone refuses to laugh at a degrading joke. The room tightens. Someone questions a policy that has always worked this way. They are labeled dramatic. Someone refuses to participate in a profitable but ethically grey practice. They are told they are overthinking. The system defends itself quietly, not through overt force, through social friction, through subtle exclusion, through the suggestion that you are ruining the atmosphere. So most people learn to calibrate their outrage carefully. Loud enough to appear conscious, soft enough to remain included. You condemn the visible monster, but you do not disturb the architecture that incubated it. Because the architecture pays salaries, grants access, provides comfort, and once you see that, the moral landscape shifts. You are not outside the system. You are positioned inside networks of exchange. You consume what you criticize. You rely on what you distrust. You defend what you claim is flawed. Not consciously malicious, just structurally entangled. And the moment you begin to question that entanglement, something else happens. Friends grow quiet. Colleagues become cautious. Family members accuse you of exaggeration. Why are you making everything political? Why can't you just focus on your own life? It's not that deep. That is how protection operates. Not through dramatic conspiracy, through collective fatigue, through the preference for comfort over coherence. You don't only fear the system, you fear the cost of stepping out of sync with it. And that fear keeps the shadow collective stabilized. There is a particular pleasure in indignation. It feels like integrity, it feels like courage, it feels like standing on the right side of history. But indignation can also be a shield, a way to discharge discomfort without dismantling the source of it. You say you are against corruption. But do you resist the subtle privileges that corruption protects? You say you are against abuse of power. But do you question the micro-dominance you exercise in spaces where you hold advantage? You say you value justice. But justice that destabilizes your comfort feels inconvenient. So indignation becomes ritual, predictable, contained. You react strongly when the monster is exposed. You post, you argue, you condemn. And then you return to your routines, your consumption, your alliances, your benefits. Virtue becomes performance, not necessarily fake, but incomplete, because it stops where the cost begins. Jung warned that what is not made conscious becomes projected outward. The moral self-image needs reinforcement, and public condemnation provides it. You feel aligned with the good, separated from the bad. But here is the fracture line. If the system that produced the monster continues functioning exactly as before, what has actually changed? The face is gone, the structure remains, and you are still inside it. There is a sentence that cuts deeper than most people allow. You don't want justice. You want to keep feeling innocent. Innocence is lighter than responsibility. Innocence allows you to observe without intervening, to criticize without restructuring, to remain morally clean without sacrificing advantage, and the ego prefers that arrangement. Because once innocence dissolves, neutrality dissolves with it. You can no longer say, "I didn't know." You can no longer say, "It's not my role." You begin to see how comfort is subsidized, how silence circulates, how complicity is rarely dramatic, just convenient. Virtue, then, becomes dangerous, because real virtue costs position, costs belonging, costs simplicity. And the moment you feel that cost approaching, notice what happens inside you. Does your certainty waver? Does your indignation soften? Does your attention move elsewhere? The shadow does not fear your outrage. It fears your willingness to destabilize what benefits you. And most people stop just before that line. The moment you stop protecting the system, even subtly, something shifts. Not dramatically, quietly. You begin to ask questions that don't dissolve easily. You hesitate before repeating narratives that once felt automatic. You notice where your comfort is connected to someone else's silence, and that awareness changes your posture. People feel it, you become less predictable, less compliant, less easy to categorize. And the environment reacts. Not because you are attacking anyone, but because you are no longer stabilizing the fiction. You stop laughing at what dehumanizes. You stop justifying what feels ethically crooked. You stop pretending that outrage is enough, and suddenly, you are intense, negative, overcomplicating things. The system does not need to expel you. It only needs to make questioning uncomfortable. Belonging becomes conditional. Opportunities grow subtle teeth. You are not threatened. You are reminded. Reminded of what you might lose. Access, approval, smooth interactions. And here the psychological cost becomes visible. It is not only about morality, it is about identity. Who are you if you are no longer the reasonable one, the balanced one, the one who understands how the world works? If you push too far, you risk being labeled unstable, difficult, idealistic. If you stay silent, you preserve your position. And the ego calculates, always. You tell yourself you are being strategic. That change takes time, that you can work within the system. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes it is avoidance dressed as patience. Because real disruption does not feel elegant. It feels lonely. It feels disorienting. You begin to see how power circulates not only through laws and institutions, but through subtle social contracts, through nods of agreement, through shared jokes, through mutual benefit. And once you see that, neutrality dissolves. You cannot unknow it. You cannot go back to clean outrage. You begin to sense how deeply intertwined you are with what you critique, not as a villain, as a participant. And that realization does not inflate you. It unsettles you. Because the shadow is no longer abstract or external. It is structural. And you are structurally positioned. Now the question is no longer theoretical. It is immediate. How much discomfort are you willing to tolerate? To stop protecting what protects you? There is a point where the narrative collapses, where you can no longer convincingly say that evil is out there. Because the more you observe, the clearer it becomes. Power does not only corrupt, it reveals. And what it reveals is rarely foreign. It amplifies what was already tolerated, already normalized, already integrated into the structure. Jung warned that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That sentence is not inspirational, it is surgical. It removes the comfort of moral distance. Making darkness conscious does not mean confessing crimes you did not commit. It means recognizing how systems operate through ordinary compliance, through routine participation, through the quiet agreement that this is just how things are. You condemn the monster, but you defend the conditions that made him profitable. You criticize the abuse, but you remain loyal to the hierarchy that rewards silence. You want change, but only if change does not destabilize you. This is where the illusion fractures. If evil is structural, then you are not simply a witness. You are positioned within incentives, within exchanges, within benefits. And once you see that, outrage is no longer enough. The real question becomes unbearable. What part of the structure would collapse if you withdrew your cooperation? Not dramatically, just personally. What would you lose? What identity would dissolve? What relationships would strain? If this tension unsettles you, stay with it. Not to purify yourself, not to declare yourself guilty, but to stop pretending that the system survives without participation. If you are willing to look at that without flinching, then stay here. Because this space is not about comfort, it is about confronting the architecture you inhabit. And if you recognize yourself somewhere in this tension, subscribe, not for reassurance, but to keep dismantling what feels stable, even when it implicates you. At some point, this stops being about politics, or institutions, or scandals. It becomes existential. Because once you recognize that evil is not a glitch, but a pattern sustained by participation, the question shifts from society to self. Who are you inside a structure you did not design but continue to inhabit? You did not invent the system, but you adapt to it. You did not create the hierarchy, but you navigate it. You did not write the rules, but you benefit from some of them. That is where identity trembles. You are not asked to collapse into guilt. You are asked to abandon innocence. There is a difference. Guilt seeks punishment. Abandoning innocence demands awareness. It demands that you stop outsourcing the shadow, that you stop pretending that condemnation is transformation. Because if power and shadow are intertwined, then maturity is not about purity. It is about integration. It is about seeing clearly where you are entangled and deciding whether comfort is worth coherence. This is not a moral performance. It is a threshold, a quiet internal crossing, where you move from spectator to participant, from participant to responsible agent. And responsibility is heavier than outrage. It does not trend. It does not applause itself. It restructures quietly, sometimes invisibly. There is a book called The Forgotten Agreement, by Luciana Santos. It speaks, in its own way, about the silent contracts we keep with ourselves long after they stop serving us. Systems function through contracts too. Unspoken, convenient, inherited. The question is not whether you signed them. The question is whether you continue honoring them without examination. Because once you see the structure, neutrality dissolves. You either help stabilize it, or you begin to withdraw from what corrodes you. That withdrawal may be subtle, but it is decisive. So now the discomfort is yours, not as accusation, as confrontation. If evil is structural, and you are inside the structure, who are you choosing to be within it? And when you look honestly at your own participation, what are you no longer willing to protect? If this unsettles you, don't rush to resolve it. Stay with the fracture, and tell me, in what area of your life do you most protect the system that protects you?